Ivan Antonovich Efremov. Lake of Mountain Spirits. Part 1. Several years ago, while researching routes, I passed through a part of the central Altai, the Listvyaga Ridge, in the area of the left bank of the upper Katun River. Gold was my goal at that time. Although I did not find any placers, I was delighted by the wonderful nature of the Altai. There was nothing particularly remarkable about the places where I was working. Listvyaga is a relatively low ridge. There are no eternal snows, squirrels, on it, so there is no sparkling variety of glacier, mountain lakes, impressive peaks, and all that high mountain beauty that amazes and captivates you in higher ranges. But the rugged charm of the mighty mountain ranges, their rocky backs rising above the mossy taiga, the mountains crashing like sea waves beneath them, rewarded me for a rather dull existence in the wide, swampy river valleys where my work mainly took place. I love the nature of the north with its silent frown, its monotony of poor colors. I love it, perhaps, for the primitive solitude and wildness peculiar to it, and I will not exchange it for the pictorial brightness of the south, which intrudes annoyingly into the soul. In moments of longing for the will, for nature, which happens to every expeditioner when life in the big city gets boring, grey rocks, leaden sea, mighty larches without peaks and frowning depths of damp spruce forests appear before my eyes. In short, I was satisfied with the monotonous scene around me and was happy to do my job. However, I still had one more task, to examine deposits of excellent asbestos in the middle reaches of the Katun, near the large village of Chemal. The shortest way to get there was to pass the highest point on the Altai-Katunsky Ridge and go down the valleys of the upper Katun. After reaching the village of Wimon, I had to pass the Terektinsky Squirrels, another high ridge, and through Onjigai to get back into the Katun Valley. Despite the hurry that forced me to make long daily crossings, it was only on this route that I experienced the real charm of the Altai nature. I still remember the moment when, after a long journey through the ermine, a dense forest of fir, cedar, and larch, I and my small caravan descended into the Katun Valley. Here, the smoothness of the slope slowed us down considerably. The horses fell through their bellies into the squeaky brown mud hidden beneath the vegetation. Every 10th meter was a struggle. But I did not stop the caravan for the night, having decided to move to the right bank of the Katun today. The moon rose early over the mountains, and it was easy to move on. The gentle sound of the swift river welcomed us to the banks of the Katun. In the moonlight, the Katun seemed very wide. But when the guide rode his horse into the murmuring, dim water, and the others rushed after him, the water was no higher than our knees, and we crossed easily to the other bank. Having crossed the floodplain covered with large pebbles, we found ourselves in a swamp called Karagainik by the Siberians. Slender spruces were scattered on a soft carpet of moss, and everywhere there were high bumps on which the stiff sedge rose and rustled. In such a place the horses would have been forced to read the paper all night, that is, to remain without fodder, and so I decided to move on. The beginning of the climb gave hope of reaching a dry place. The path sank into the gloomy blackness of the spruce forest, and the horses' feet sank into the soft carpet of moss. We walked for an hour and a half until the forest thinned out, firs and cedars appeared, the moss almost disappeared, but the ascent did not end. On the contrary, it became even steeper. No matter how happy we were, 2 more hours of climbing seemed very hard after all the effort of the day. That's why everyone was happy when the horses' shoes jingled and sparks flew from the rocks and the almost flat top of the spur appeared. Here was grass for the horses and a dry place for tents. The horses were unhitched at once, the tents pitched under huge cedars, and after the usual procedure of drinking a bucket of tea and smoking pipes, we fell into a deep sleep. I was awakened by a bright light and quickly got out of the tent. A fresh breeze swayed the dark green branches of the cedars that towered just outside the tent entrance. There was a wide gap between the 2 trees to the left. In it, like a black frame, hung the slight outlines of 4 sharp white peaks in the clear pink light. The air was wonderfully transparent. Every conceivable combination of bright reds flowed down the steep slopes of the whites. A little farther down, on the convex surface of the blue glacier, lay great slanting blue streaks of shadow. This blue foundation enhanced the airy lightness of the mountain hulks, which seemed to radiate their own light, while the sky visible between them was a sea of pure gold. A few minutes passed. The sun rose higher, the gold took on a purple hue, the peaks fled their pink hue and turned pure blue, the glacier glittered with silver. Both alas rang, the workers, echoing under the trees, brought down the horses for the packs, wrapped and tied the packs, and I still admired the victory of the magic of light. After the closed circle of the taiga trails, after the wild harshness of the mountain tundras, it was a new world of transparent radiance and light, of the changing play of the sun. As you can see, my first love for the highlands of the Altai squirrels flared up unexpectedly and strongly. This love did not bring disappointment in the future, but gave me new impressions. I will not try to describe the feeling that arises at the sight of the extraordinary transparency of blue or emerald water of mountain lakes, the shining glitter of blue ice. Suffice it to say that the sight of snow-capped mountains gave me a heightened awareness of the beauty of nature. These almost musical transitions of light, shadow, and color conveyed a blissful harmony to the world. And I, a very earthly person, was attuned differently in the mountain world, and no doubt my discovery, which I am about to recount, was in some measure due to this high attunement. Having passed through the high mountains, I descended into the Katun Valley and then the Wemon Steppe, a flat basin with excellent fodder for horses. The Terektin squirrels did not provide me with any interesting geological observations. Having reached Onjigai, I sent my assistant to Bisk with collections and equipment. A visit to the Chemal asbestos deposits was easily accomplished. With a guide on fresh horses, we soon reached the Katun and stopped for a rest in the village of Kyancha. The tea with fragrant honey was particularly delicious, and we sat for a long time at the neat white table in the garden. My guide, Ador, and silent Oirat, were sucking on a copper-plated pipe. I asked my host about the attractions of the onward journey to Chemal. The host, a young teacher with an open, tanned face, was happy to satisfy my curiosity. "Here's something else, comrade engineer," he said. "Not far from Chemal there is a village. Our famous artist Chorosov lives there. You must have heard of him. The old man is angry, but if he likes you, he will show you everything, and he has many beautiful paintings." I remembered Chorosov's paintings that I had seen in Tomsk and Bisk, especially the Crown of Katun and Khan Altai. To see the numerous works of Chorosov in his studio and to buy some sketches would be a good conclusion of my acquaintance with Altai. In the middle of the next day, I saw to the right the wide valley that had been indicated to me. On the slope at the foot of the larches were several new houses, glistening in light yellow wood. Everything was exactly as the Kyancha teacher had described, and I confidently steered my horse towards the house of the artist Chorosov. Expecting to see a grumpy old man, I was surprised to see an agile, lean, shaven-headed man with quick and precise movements appear on the veranda. It was only when I looked into his yellowish Mongolian face that I noticed the heavy grey in his long hair and stiff moustache. Sharp wrinkles lingered on his sunken cheeks, under his prominent cheekbones and on his bulging forehead. I was greeted kindly, but not warmly, and followed him, somewhat embarrassed. Probably influenced by the sincerity of my admiration for the beauty of the Altai, Chorosov became more friendly. His pithy stories about some of the most remarkable places in the Altai were clearly memorable to me. Such was his power of observation. The workshop, a spacious, unplastered room with large windows, took up half the house. Among the many sketches and small paintings, one stood out, and somehow I was immediately drawn to it. According to Chorosov, it was his personal version of Denaider, the Lake of Mountain Spirits, a large canvas of which is in one of the Siberian museums. I will describe this small canvas in more detail as it is important for understanding what follows. The painting glowed in the rays of the evening sun with its rich colors. The blue-gray surface of the lake, which occupies the central part of the painting, breathes cold and silent peace. In the foreground, near the rocks on the flat shore, where the green of the grass mixes with patches of pure snow, lies the trunk of a cedar tree. A large blue ice floe nestles against the shore, at the very roots of a fallen tree. Small ice floes and large grey rocks cast greenish and grey-blue shadows across the surface of the lake. Two low, wind-torn cedars raised their thick branches like arms to the sky. In the background, the snow-white cliffs of the jagged mountains, with rocky ribs in purple and pale colors, plunged straight into the lake. In the center of the picture, a glacier spur lowers a shaft of blue fin into the lake, and above it, a diamond-shaped pyramid rises to a terrifying height, from which a scarf of pink clouds curls to the left. The left edge of the valley, the Troga, is formed by a regular cone-shaped mountain, also almost entirely covered in snow. Only rare pale streaks mark the rocky cliffs. The mountain stands on a broad base, the stone steps of which descend in a giant staircase to the far end of the lake. The whole picture reeked of that detachment and cold, sparkling purity that had gripped me on my way up the Khatan Mountains. I stood there for a long time, looking at the true face of the Altai squirrels, marveling at the subtle observation of the people who gave the lake the name Denaider, Lake of the Mountain Spirits. "Where did you find such a lake?" I asked. "And does it really exist?" "The lake does exist, and I must say it is even better in reality. My merit lies in the correct expression of the essence of the impression," replied Chorosov. "This essence was not cheap for me. Well, it is not easy to find this lake, although it is possible, of course." "Why do you want to find it? Did you have to mark it on the map?" "I know you. Just to visit a wonderful place. Once you've seen it, you won't be afraid of death." The artist looked at me curiously. "And it is true what you said, death will no longer be afraid of death. You probably don't know what legends the Oiros have associated with this lake. It must be interesting if they gave it such a poetic name." Chorosov looked at the painting. "You didn't notice that?" "I did. Here, in the left corner, where the mountain is conical," I said. "I'm sorry, but the colors here seem impossible to me. But look at it again, more closely." I began to look again, and such was the subtlety of the artist's work that the more I looked, the more details seemed to emerge from the depths of the picture. At the foot of the conical mountain, a greenish-white cloud was rising, emitting a faint light. The intersecting reflections of this light and the light from the glittering snow on the water gave rise to long streaks of shadows that were somehow red in color. The same patches, but thicker, almost bloody, could be seen in the crevices of the cliffs. And where direct sunlight penetrated behind the white wall of the ridge, long columns of bluish-green smoke or steam, resembling huge human figures, rose above the ice and rocks, giving the landscape an eerie and fantastic appearance. "I don't understand," I pointed at the bluish-green pillars. "And don't try," Chorosov grinned. "You know and love nature, but you don't believe in it. And how do you explain the red lights in the rocks, the blue-green pillars, the glowing clouds?" "The explanation is simple. Mountain spirits," the artist replied calmly. I turned to him, but there was not the slightest trace of a grin on his reserved face. "I'm not joking," he continued in the same tone. "Do you think the lake was named just because of its unearthly beauty? Beauty is beauty, but fame is bad. So I took a picture there and could hardly get away. I was there in 999, and I was ill until 13. I asked the artist to tell me about the legends surrounding the lake. We sat down in a corner on a wide sofa covered with a coarse yellow and blue Mongolian carpet. From here we could see the Lake of the Mountain Spirits. "The beauty of this place," began Chorosov, "has long attracted people, but some strange forces have often destroyed people who came to the lake. I have experienced the lake's fatal influence myself, but I'll tell you about it later. It is interesting that the lake is most beautiful on warm summer days, and its destructive power is most evident on such days. As soon as people saw the blood-red lights in the rocks, the flickering blue-green transparent columns, they began to feel strange sensations. The surrounding snowy peaks seemed to press a monstrous weight on their heads, and their eyes began an uncontrollable dance of light beams. People were drawn to the round cone-shaped mountain, where they saw the blue-green ghosts of the mountain spirits dancing around a greenish glowing cloud. But as soon as they reached the place, everything disappeared, and only bare rocks stood guard. Gasping for breath, their legs barely moving from the sudden loss of strength, their souls depressed, the unfortunates left the fatal place, but death usually overtook them on the way. Only a few strong hunters made it to the next yurt after incredible agony. Some of them died, others were sick for a long time, having lost their former strength and courage forever. Since then, the fame of Denider has spread far and wide, and people almost never visit it. There are no animals or birds there, and on the left bank, where the spirits gather, nothing grows, not even grass. I had heard this legend when I was a child, and I had long wanted to visit the domain of the mountain spirits. 20 years ago I spent 2 days there alone. On the first day I noticed nothing special and spent a long time sketching. But thick clouds moved across the sky, changing the light, and I was unable to capture the transparency of the mountain air. I decided to stay another day and spent the night in the forest, half a mile from the lake. In the evening I felt a strange burning sensation in my mouth, which made me spit saliva all the time, and a slight nausea. I usually tolerated the altitude well and wondered why the thin air was having such an effect on me. The beautiful morning of the next day promised perfect weather. I walked to the lake with a heavy head, feeling very weak, but soon I was absorbed in my work and forgot all about it. The sun was warming up as I finished the sketch that would later form the basis of the painting, and I moved away from the easel to have one last look at the lake. I was very tired, my hands were shaking, my head was sometimes foggy, and I felt nauseous. Then I saw the spirits of the lake. The shadow of a low cloud was floating over the clear surface of the water. The sun's rays were slanting across the lake, as if brighter after a momentary eclipse. At the far edge of light and shadow, I suddenly noticed several pillars of ghostly blue-green color, like huge human figures in robes. They either stood still, moved quickly, or vanished into thin air. I gazed at this unprecedented sight with a sense of oppressive fear. The silent movement of the spirits continued for a few more minutes, and then there were flashes of blood-colored light in the rocks. And above it all hung a mushroom-shaped cloud, glowing with a faint green light. Suddenly I felt a surge of power, my vision sharpened, the distant cliffs seemed to tower above me, I could make out all the details of their steep slopes. I grabbed my brush and, with wild energy, picked up the colors, trying to capture the extraordinary image with hasty strokes. A light breeze blew across the lake, and instantly the cloud and the blue-green ghosts disappeared. Only the red lights in the cliffs remained, glimmering in the shadows cast by the rocks across the water. The excitement that had gripped me faded, the malaise increased dramatically, as if the vitality were draining from the ends of the fingers that held the palette and brush. A premonition of something bad made me hurry. I closed the sketchbook and gathered my things, feeling a terrible weight on my chest and head.